So today we are talking about webinars and how to incorporate them as part of your 2025 plan. If you have questions while I'm talking, please be sure to add your questions in the chat. I will do my best to incorporate them into the conversation today. And today we're actually going to be more of a conversational style of presentation, because this is a really this isn't a science. Webinars are not a science. Webinars are more of an art. And there are a lot of different ways that you can present webinars that perform well. We've tested many different types of webinars with clients in different industries over the past 2 years. And I think that we've kind of nailed down the different ways that webinars make an impact and the styles of webinar that are most effective. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, and a lot about how to create your own plan that is going to build credibility, build visibility, and get you help you gain more clients, help you build your business forward. Webinars were, let's kind of start at the beginning of how webinars have reemerged as a top digital marketing tactic. Digital webinars back in like 2012, 2013, they were more of like an emerging trend. They weren't so like mainstream, but they were kind of a tactic that were being used in professional services, financial services, and health tech. That really died off in 2016, 2017. It really didn't pick up a ton of steam um, until the pandemic. And then once everything shut down, everything was done online, and everything started to kind of, anything that was digital really started to regain traction. So things like blogs, things like LinkedIn, things like webinars, these are all trends that started to emerge with the pandemic, and they've really remained and become even more powerful today. So webinars were something that I did not really recommend that my clients engage in prior to 2020. They were a nice to have, they were not an essential. Today, going into 2025, I would say that they are an essential. If not webinars, then video certainly is an essential part of your digital marketing plan for the upcoming year. Webinars are great because they, number one, they stand alone as a piece of content that gives you credibility and thought leadership and helps you engage people that are in your pipeline with content that speaks directly to the challenges that they're facing. But on top of that, it creates a lot of additional content that you can take and repurpose for your entire presence. You can cut clips from your webinar for your social media feed. You can cut clips for your newsletter. If you're trying to build a YouTube audience, it's a great way to bring people into your full-length videos. There's a lot of different ways that you can repurpose the content from your webinars. And a lot of the time, if you're using webinars to speak to challenges that customers and prospects face in your industry, it's evergreen content, which means it's content that can be reused for a really long time. And I even see clients take webinars that they present once and repurpose it as like a replay webinar down the road. So maybe we're going to present something today as a live webinar, and then in 6 months we're going to replay it as an automated webinar. In 3 months we're going to use it as an automated webinar, so that we can continue to get value out of the time and effort that goes into preparing this content, because anything video driven does require a little bit more effort than something that's not video. The reason why video and webinar has really, I believe, taken off over the past couple of years is that, well, everything has shifted to being virtual. And I realize that, there is a lot of return to office happening right now. There is more in-person meetings and events that are happening. It's still not back to those pre-pandemic levels. A lot of things are still conducted in a virtual setting and will continue to be conducted in a virtual setting. And so video and webinars really help to put another like stamp of confidence on the fact that you know what you're talking about. When someone sees you talking about a particular topic or a particular challenge or a particular solution, they know that that information is coming directly from you. Whereas with like written content, with a blog or a social post, it could be written by anyone. So it's like another layer of credibility, and it does tend to accelerate prospects that are in your pipeline when you incorporate webinars and video into your strategy as a whole. Let's talk a little bit about the types of webinars that exist and what's going to perform best for your company specifically. So if you think of a webinar, what you probably think of is how we have traditionally run our webinars, which is we have a PowerPoint presentation, we have a speaker that's going to present on the subject matter that's on the PowerPoint, and that is the entirety of the presentation. And that is one really good way to use webinars. That's a really good way to conduct webinars, but it's not the only way to conduct webinars. And I'm going to urge you, as we talk about strategy, to not only consider that as the only type of webinar content that you can produce. So what we have found to be very effective is to host virtual roundtables where you bring in maybe a couple of people from your company, or maybe a partner, or maybe a customer who you can have a conversation with and make it more of a fireside chat. These tend to be very impactful because they feel very authentic and they feel like people can really connect and ask questions. And it also gives you an added layer of credibility when you are able to bring someone on from another organization. It's almost like an endorsement for your company that they're willing to participate in a piece of virtual content that you're producing. So that's one way that we have found to create a big impact with webinars, where more of the educational style is something that we will sprinkle in, but that fireside chat style or roundtable style, where we really hone in on like a Q&A at the end of the presentation, tends to be the most effective way for us to present information. Now, when you think about that, what I have found to be the most manageable, it's obviously easiest when you only have one presenter, because you only have to worry about getting one person prepared to share information or share content. You only have to prepare one piece of, like, one document, one PowerPoint, that is to say. If you have multiple people on, you're kind of coordinating different conversation topics. You are coordinating different companies with different value propositions. You are coordinating different messages. Sometimes you are coordinating multiple PowerPoints depending on the style of presentation that they're going to give. So it is a little bit more complicated to create these multiplayer, I guess you could say, presentations than it is to have just one person on the screen. But it is worth it. It is worth the time and effort, because you get that added authenticity, you get that added credibility, but you also get that added marketing. So if you're looking to expand your message outside of your existing sphere, your existing network, having a partner join you for one of these conversations is a great way to get in front of their audience as well, because you can tag them on social media, you can ask them to share it, you can give them their own assets that they can deploy to bring people in to register for the webinar, which is in turn growing your audience in a really organic and authentic way. When you do these presentations with other people, the best way to do that is to kind of have some structure around it, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, the process of how we prepare these, but you need to have prep time. You need to have a longer lead time. So normally, if I'm going to give a presentation and I need to create a PowerPoint, or if we have a client that's going to do a webinar and it's just one person with a PowerPoint, we don't do any prep. They are able to prepare themselves. They prepare their own slides. They know what they're going to talk about. And typically there's not a lot of involvement that we need to have to help them get ready for the webinar. When we have multiple people on, because of that coordination effort, there's more steps in the process, and there is more of a lead-in timeline for preparation before we launch it to the public to invite people to register. So let's talk a little bit about that in just a second. But before I dive into that, I feel like I'm throwing all of the things at you right now strategically, which is kind of how my brain works. So I'm sorry if that's a challenge. Be sure to ask questions in the chat section. So there are a couple of different ways that you can deploy a webinar. So we have the different styles of how you would present the information, but we also have the different ways to share the information with your audience. And the first is the way that I personally prefer to do webinars, which is what we're doing right now, which is we're recording live. And I have an outline of what I want to talk about today. Sometimes I have a PowerPoint presentation prepared. Sometimes I do not. but this is my personal preferred way to do this. Now, for a lot of our clients, this is very intimidating. They don't like getting on live and talking straight to a screen, especially if it's just them themselves. It can feel really weird to just look at yourself on a screen and see yourself talking. So what we do for most of our client webinars is we pre-record. And we pre-record in Zoom because it's a universal platform that everyone can use, whether it's just them or if they're bringing on other partners or other colleagues that are going to join in the conversation. We pre-record. And as part of that, we are able to edit out any mistakes that happen. It's honestly not super common for our clients to have a bunch of mistakes on a webinar. But it happens, and it makes them feel a lot better that we can edit those out, or that if they make a mistake, they can start over and we can cut out the section that had maybe they stumbled over their words or they gave the wrong stat and they want to correct it. So that can be another way. If you are struggling to get people on board in your organization to do webinars, that can be a great way to, encourage them and just let them know that, hey, we can pre-record this. It doesn't have to be live. It's also really great if you have compliance concerns and you need to run your content through compliance before you launch it. That pre-recorded option is another great way to run this. We use this platform that we're on right now called Demio. This is, I've tried so many webinar platforms over the years. Demio is my favorite. I have been so impressed with the platform and how it functions. So if you are looking for that, I can send you a link to sign up, or you can go to demio.com and sign up. It's relatively cost effective for what comes with it. It has all of the tools built in, and that is something that I think is invaluable for very busy marketing people. So you don't have to manually build the sign-up forms. You don't have to manually schedule your emails to go out. You don't even have to manually schedule your replay email. You can populate all of that information when you are setting up your webinar, and it's done for you. You can run 3 different types of webinars in Demio, which I think this is so cool. The first is just a live webinar like what we're recording right now. The second is a pre-recorded webinar where the video is going to launch and go live on its own, but you can still have a live chat. So a lot of times what we will do for our clients is we'll set this up with that pre-recorded webinar, but they'll still be on the webinar live in the chat as a moderator, and they can interact with people that have questions during the session. And the other is an on-demand webinar. So you can set up your webinars to be available on demand, which is great if you have evergreen content that you want to push out, or if you don't think that your audience is going to be available at one specific day and time. 3 different types. I think they're all great. The other thing that we have found really effective for some of our clients with Demio is that we can, and also for ourselves with our new marketing portal, is that we can set up series of events where people only have to register once and they gain access to an entire series of virtual events. So they don't have to keep signing up for every single webinar. So for example, we have our marketing tracker series, our foundational marketing series, which is part of our our marketing portal. And if you register for one, you get access to all 4 sessions for the month. They are recorded live, and they're just like short trainings that go through the different marketing that you should be doing each month. And if you aren't able to attend live, you can replay right afterward. So it's a great way to kind of leverage video content and hold your group of clients available if that's something that's helpful for them. Or maybe you have a once a month webinar that you do for each quarter, and you want to let people register once for every quarter of webinars. That's a great tool to use. Anyway, I'm really going down the rabbit hole on Demio. All in all, it's a great platform. We have found it to be very effective, and it manages everything. Other tools you might look at using, GoToWebinar, not my favorite, but GoToWebinar and Zoom webinars are very similar. They're not my favorite. I think that the sign up functionality is a little bit outdated. And I just honestly prefer something that's more cloud-based and a little bit more modern looking, which is why I prefer this platform. I also think this platform is a lot easier to use. Others that we have used for clients, I mean, there's a million of them out there. Some email platforms have webinar functionality built in now. There's different like live streaming platforms that you can use. I have tried a lot of them. A lot of them are very complicated. And so I would recommend like kind of going through the trial period if you are exploring what platform to use, and just try to test like 3 of them out at a time and see what you like. Just make sure you cancel them before they charge you. So that's a little bit on like choosing a platform and the webinar styles that work best and how to kind of set yourself up for success. In terms of the process that we use to drive success, this looks a little bit different. Like I said, there's different styles of webinar. So this process changes just a little bit between the different styles of webinar, like depending on what style of webinar you're going to produce. What I will say is that for pre-recorded webinars, especially pre-recorded webinars that we are doing for someone else, like if we have a client that's going to do a roundtable with 2 of their partners, we will not, and I highly recommend that you use this kind of, let's call it a boundary for marketing people. I highly recommend you use this and kind of use this as your boundary for creating webinar content and making it live. We will not start promoting a webinar until it is recorded, because those recording dates can change, and we need at least 3 weeks in between the date of recording and the date that it goes live, because we need to have time to go in and do the edits and make sure everybody's good with the edits and do all of the promo. And we don't want to ever get to a place where we've now started promoting that the webinar is this date and the recording gets delayed and we only have a week of time to prep for that go live date. So that's one rule that we do have in place for our clients that like to do pre-recorded webinars, and it's that we will not promote until it's recorded. And it's a 3-week gap between, at least a 3-week gap between recording date and go live date. In terms of like process for how we prepare for those pre-recorded webinars. For the solo webinars where there is no real prep work because it's one person's knowledge that's going to be shared, there isn't a lot that needs to be done other than making sure that they're acclimated and comfortable with the platform that we're using. And that can be done at any time during that promo period. I may give them a like drop dead date of when they need to have their presentation done, just for their own, just for themselves, so that they don't leave it until the very last minute. But by and large, like that's a very self-managed process. And usually people that are comfortable presenting on a webinar, they do a lot of speaking. So they don't need as much of the engagement to prepare. If we are doing any kind of roundtable, whether it's pre-recorded or live, we always have a kickoff meeting with all of the stakeholders. So anybody that's going to be involved in speaking, creating the content, or promoting the webinar is on this strategy session. Usually these are a little bit more intensive. So that's why we bring all of those stakeholders together. And that's where we start planning kind of the timeline of how we're going to deploy the full event. And so typically for these, we recommend 2 planning sessions. The first is the kickoff. We're going to identify what the topic is, a tentative outline. You're going to identify who the speakers are going to be, and then a tentative recording date and a tentative launch date. And you're going to put all of those things on the calendar. Then what we like to do is we create a Google Doc. You guys know I am huge on Google products for anything that's shared because they update in real time. You're not worried about sending old outdated versions of the document back and forth, and you can collaborate with people very easily. So we'll create a Google Doc with that outline on it, and then ask everyone to add their input. And then usually about 2 weeks later, we'll have kind of that final come together meeting, which is just the people that are going to be participating in the live session. We'll refine that. We'll make sure that we have any questions pre-created. We assign out who's going to be handling each topic and who's going to be asking each question. And that's when we start pushing everything live. So that's not when we start pushing everything live. That's when we finalize all of the materials, when we finalize the description, the title, all of those things. Then we get on, the next step is going to be to do the recording, which is usually within a week of that last meeting. It really, timeline wise, like that just really depends on when everyone's available and how quickly you want to get the webinar out there. But typically for us, that happens within a week of that final meeting. And we record, we go through, like, it's very simple. And honestly, everybody's like always so surprised with how easy it is to do the actual recording, because the prep work really simplifies the whole process, because you already know what questions you're going to be asked. You can prepare your responses, all of those things. So we jump on, we record start to finish. If we need to re-record, we do that. And then we can start making the marketing live. And for that marketing process, we always require at least 3 weeks in between launch and go live, or I'm sorry, recording and go live date. And we have kind of a tried and true process that we use for marketing this. So we have 3 emails that we recommend going out for the 3 weeks before the event. So, and it's really not a true 3 weeks. We send an email out about 2.5 weeks before. We send out an email about a week before, and then we send out an email the day before. And we see the most registrations, no matter what the industry is, on that last email that goes out. It is the most bizarre thing, but a lot of people are last minute signups. We have some social media content that goes out. Social media does not typically drive webinar signups. You would be so surprised. It's probably 95% come from email. So if you have not spent time building up an email list, even if it's 150 people, I recommend you start there and you start building credibility by starting to send out monthly emails. We just talked about this week, how you can get consistent with your newsletter in our digital marketing portal. If you are a member, you can access it in the portal. If you are not a member, it's free. You can go to amplifymktg.com and get registered and signed up. And we have all of our trainings are organized in there. We have 2 more live trainings this month, I believe. In our marketing tracker, we did one on building your social media calendar and then one on building consistency with a monthly newsletter. That's a great way to start building credibility with your audience. So if the first thing you do is invite people, it takes time to build traction with getting people to sign up. So if you haven't done these things in the past, it's going to be a slow build to get people to sign up for your webinars and to get people to start engaging with your content. So just start somewhere. Just start pushing that content out. That's what the portal is designed to help you do. So anyway, you're going to start sending out those emails. You're going to do that social media content. I always recommend sending out personal invites. So if you have people on your team that are really hoping to get particular clients or particular prospects on, I really encourage you to give them a link to the sign up landing page and ask them to invite their people personally, because those personal invites really drive a lot of traction for those signups. If you're a member of any associations or organizations that are willing to promote your webinar on your behalf, definitely get it in front of them, because that's another great resource that people often underutilize. But if you are paying for membership to these organizations, you want to definitely make sure you're maximizing your reach with their member base. And it's going to be more impactful for them to send out an invite to your webinar than for you to send out a webinar invite to your webinar. In terms of planning for 2025, like how many webinars should you be planning? That is so dependent on your overall strategy, how many speakers you have, what topics you want to talk about, and what your sales cycle looks like. If I were just getting started, I mean, the easiest way to plan for this would be to say, okay, we're going to do 1 webinar a quarter. We've never done this before. That gives us plenty of planning time. I feel like that's not an overwhelming amount of webinar content to create. So we're going to start by trying to create 1 per quarter. And I would choose your dates right now. I would kind of start creating a tentative outline of what conversations are we having each quarter that we can answer frequently asked questions about on a webinar. That's a great place to start. Or how can we design content in each quarter that is going to support the challenges that our clients often face in this quarter? Whenever you format your webinars to be informative and educational and actionable, like you're giving them something that they can do to solve a problem that they have within their business, you're going to get a higher attendance and a higher response rate than trying to sell something. I have had clients um, try to create sales driven presentations, webinars where they just go over products or they just go over services. And it is not super effective. And it does not bring that kind of like long-term thought leadership that's going to help you grow. It's even if you do get a couple of new bites out of it, it's a short-lived thing because you're not building a relationship with people. You are selling them something. So I am a huge advocate of using webinars as an opportunity to build a relationship with people that you want to work with long term. How can you solve a problem that they have or give them the tools to solve a problem that they have? Maybe that does incorporate talking a little bit about your company and what you do, but it's not all about your company and what you do. You're giving them the tools to solve a problem. You're bringing people to the table who have been through the same thing and talking about how they have solved that problem and what the impact has been for them, as opposed to just creating something that is designed to sell a product. I need a drink of coffee. So thinking about that quarterly is really helpful. I think that's a less overwhelming way to design your year. If you leave your webinar planning to the last minute, it's going to be very hard to make this successful. You're going to be less consistent with the webinars that you create. You're not going to have as strategic of topics, and you're going to have a shorter time window for promoting them. So thinking now about how frequently you want to do these webinars in 2025, and then what like tentative topics. It doesn't mean you're tied to that topic, but it at least gives you a direction that you're working in to create success. And that's going to help you get more buy-in from the people that need to speak because you're giving them lead time. This is so funny because I'm totally going off topic right now, but I swear that it all ties back together. So my son is very much like, he has the mindset of a lawyer. He's 12, but we call him the mini lawyer because that is just literally who he is. It's uncanny. I work with a lot of lawyers, so it's uncanny to see him think, like how he processes things and how he does things is very organized and very similar to like a lawyer or an engineer or someone that deals with numbers a lot. And watching him, I told him on Tuesday, we went to his 12-year checkup at the doctor, and she said, okay, you should get a flu shot while you're here. Meanwhile, I had already booked flu shots for this weekend. And he could not wrap his mind around getting his flu shot on Tuesday at his appointment because he needed that like mental preparation time to get ready for the fact that he had to get a shot because he hates shots. So think about that in terms of someone who hates going live or hates getting on a webinar screen or just is, needs more of that processing time to prepare themselves for something that they're not used to doing a lot. The more lead time you can give people in terms of like, this is what we're doing, this is when we're doing it, this is how we're doing it, these are my expectations of you, the better off you're going to be. The more buy-in you're going to get, the easier it is going to be to create this. And just, it's going to be a lot more seamless. So I would highly recommend just having a plan. If you want to do more webinar content than that, I think that would be amazing. If I were going to give like our client that does the most video and webinar content, we are doing this year, they do one piece of content every single month, which really is not, still like for them, they've worked up to that, but that's not an overwhelming amount of content. And we alternate. So we alternate between webinar content and video content. We do a webinar one month, we do a video the following month. And that has created a lot of balance, and it's kept everyone really excited about what we're doing. They don't feel like we're overloading them with requests for creating that content. Internally for Amplify, we do a lot of video content. We have probably at least one piece of video or webinar content going out weekly. So, for us, like, it's a lot of content to produce, but this is what we do. For someone that's not working in marketing, a weekly piece of content would be a very big ask. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about how many of these you want to do. I would not recommend, especially if you're just getting started with consistency with these types of tactics, doing more than one piece of webinar or long form video content monthly. Promoting your webinars, we talked a little bit about that already, but maximizing attendance means you need at least 3 weeks to promote your webinar. If you have a series of webinars, you could have people sign up kind of on more of a rolling basis where they sign up once and they gain access to all of them. If you have questions about that, please feel free to reach out to hello@amplifyup.com. My team is happy to talk more about your specific situation and what you should be thinking about and how often you should be doing webinars. But I do think that, one of the biggest values is how you reuse the content from your webinar. It shouldn't be something that's static, one and done. You box it up after the webinar is done and you don't look at it ever again. I see so many companies get overwhelmed by the volume of content that really needs to be created to create an impact today, because things have become so digital and it takes so many more interactions to get someone to pay attention to your message so that they know who you are, they like you, they trust you, they want to work with you. That doesn't even get them across the hurdle of buying from you. That just gets them to a point where they know you enough and they trust you enough that they would buy from you. I saw when I worked in the agency world, I believe it was like in the 90s, it was 4 to 6 interactions with you or your business that built that know, like, trust factor. Today, it's somewhere between 20 and 24, which is a lot. When you think about that in terms of how people used to engage, where everything was face-to-face or on the phone, or it was like a print ad or a billboard, 4 to 6 interactions, I mean, that really was probably a year of interacting with a particular person or a brand. And you think now 20 to 24 touch points, if you had to pick up the phone or see someone in person 20 to 24 times, can you imagine how slow your sales process would be? Digital marketing is really the key to increasing the speed that you close deals, to the speed that you move someone into your prospect pipeline. And so content really is king. But if you're creating this long form content, it can do so much more for you than just live as a standalone video on YouTube or live as a one-time webinar. Use tools to cut it up into clips. I am a huge fan of Opus, opus.pro, I believe is the landing page. I'll check with Lucy on my team to confirm that that's the right tool. It is amazing. You can take a YouTube link, wrap it into the platform. It will analyze the video. It will cut up the top clips for you. You can edit the length of it. You can change like what it's including. You can add captions. You can add, it's very cool. It's a very cool platform. It's very inexpensive and it really helps you identify, like it cuts down on the editing time, because if you had to go through a full 1-hour webinar and get all the best clips from it, it would take a long time. This really cuts down on the editing time and allows you to just kind of hone in on what message you want to send. We use tools like Descript, which is a transcribe-based video editor. We use a platform called Veed, V-E-E-D, I believe is the correct spelling of that. And that's an amazing video editor. And so like you just have to find the right tools to make this whole process of cutting your content into digestible clips really simple for you. So once we do a webinar, there's a couple of things that we pretty much always do. One, we put it on YouTube because you need a centralized place for that content to live long term. The second thing that we do is we cut it into clips that we can use on LinkedIn. And then when we post those clips on LinkedIn, we point people to the full webinar so that they can go back and watch it. Excuse me, sometimes we will use that on-demand option with the webinar platform, but by and large, we're really leaning into using our YouTube presence to host those long-form videos. We host it also in a more organized fashion in the marketing portal, in addition to other trainings that don't go on our YouTube page. But using that there and then looking at what did we talk about in this webinar that would make a great blog post? Can we pull some ideas out of the transcript that our writer can then turn into a blog post? Or is there enough data that was shared in this webinar that we can turn it into a white paper or a case study if we did an interview with a client or something like that? So you really can get creative. As a marketer, webinars are great because they're giving you so much content that you can take and repurpose. And now we have so many tools that make that so much easier. So then the other thing that I do that a lot of people don't do is look at, was there a particular story or a particular topic that we talked about that would make a great media pitch? So for some of our clients, like one of our clients is a financial advisor, and she really specializes in helping widows and widowers after they've lost a spouse manage their finances for the long term and understand the impact that that loss is going to have on their finances. And so taking content from her and being able to pitch that to local media and say, hey, this is a really unique topic. Would you like to do a story on this? That's another way that you can take some of that content and repurpose it. You can get really creative with how you reuse a lot of this content. There's just like, the sky is the limit. The foundational pieces though, cut it into clips, reuse them as your LinkedIn content, push people back to your full-length webinar. Make sure that you are including it in your newsletter because email is the number one way to reach people still. And so making sure that you include those replay links in your newsletter is really essential. You could also do a drip campaign. Once you have a couple of these and maybe they're speaking to really specific topics, it's a great way to stay engaged with cold prospects. So saying, hey, we have this webinar, you might find it useful. We talked about X, Y, and Z. That's a great way to engage people in a drip campaign, especially if you have multiple pieces of content that you could put into different emails. Now we're really going down the rabbit hole. So there's lots of different ways you can use this content. I think that's the bottom line here. So in terms of like bringing this all together, the next step would be for you to start thinking about 2025. If you are in charge of marketing, I would definitely make webinars part of your 2025 strategy. In fact, if I were in any of these industries and looking at what's going to make the biggest impact for me to support my salespeople in 2025, the core things that I would be adding to my list would be LinkedIn content and LinkedIn engagement. It would be getting a regular monthly newsletter out, setting up at least a quarterly webinar or video, like long form video, 20 to 30 minutes long. And then I would also be looking at how I can leverage localized PR to not so much in health tech, but health tech would be more national PR. But if you are in professional services or financial services, localized PR is a way underutilized tool that could really help you get some additional exposure in 2025. Obviously, the full marketing plan depends on what company you work for, how much bandwidth you have, and all of those things. But those are kind of the 4 foundational pieces that I would definitely be looking at using in 2025. I hope this has been super helpful for you guys today. If you have questions, be sure to reach out. We are in the thick of strategic planning for 2025 for all of our clients right now. So this is like all we're doing. So feel free to reach out if you have questions. If you have not joined our marketing portal, make sure you do. It's amplifymktg.com. And all of our upcoming trainings are listed in the events section, in addition to easy to find, easy to access past trainings that we've done. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.